Hello everyone, welcome back to Salesforce Developer Interview Question and Answer series. Today we will continue with the part 2 video where I will be discussing Apex again. Okay, it's a continuation video. If you have not watched part 1, I strongly recommend you to watch that video first. Okay, so let's get started. So as I said, we will continue with Apex. Question number 16. So why do we use transactional control statements? Okay. We use transaction control statements in a scenario where we are executing multiple DML statements. Okay. And we want to roll back all the DMLs if one DML fails. So what happens sometimes, I have insert some records into an object A. I'll not give object A. Let's say I want to insert accounts in account object. Okay. And then I want to insert few objects in account contact object, right? So basically in this transaction, I'm trying to insert account and its contacts. Okay. So what happens is if contact fails, if anything in the contacts fails, I even don't want to, continue inserting that account record as well. Okay. Because I want them to go together. So that is nothing but, in that scenarios, we use transactional controls. Okay. So we use transactional control statements in a scenario where we are executing multiple DML statements. Okay. Right. One DML is to insert in accounts, another DML to insert in contacts. Right. And if we want to roll back all DMLs, if one DML fails, then in that scenario, we use transactional controls. Okay. So next question number 17, what are transactional control statements? Okay. So basically what are transactional control? Okay. Database.SafePoint and database.rollback are transactional control statements. So if you want to write a code in such a format, right, then we have to use transactional control statements. So these two are the transactional control statements. First, I will start my code with the database.SafePoint and I will write all my code, and then I will write database.rollback, to roll back this code, right? These are available in the database class. You remember in the previous video, I have explained you about database class. Transactional control statements are also very, very important interview question. Okay. So you have to understand what is database class, how do we use database class to insert, update and delete, right? Then only you will be able to easily understand SafePoint rollback, because these are also from the database classes. Okay. Next question number 18, can you write a sample code for a transactional control statement, right? So sometimes interviewer might ask you to write the code, right? So we can write like this: account A is equals to new account. This is the simplest form, right? So you can make it complex as well. Okay. So account A is equals to new account, right? You can insert the account and then create a save point, right? While account number is null. So what we can do is save point SP. We are declaring a variable is equals to database.set save point, right? And change the account number like A.account number is equals to 123, right? And then update A. Then what we are doing is we are asking it to roll it back, or else you can do insert as well. So let's say, for example, you created a save point, okay, and you have inserted an account record, and then you insert a contact record, right? And what you do is you can create I would say try catch block, right? Try catch block we have not, exception handling we have not covered, but if you want to try few more scenarios, just try catch block. In the catch block, what you can do is if there is an error in account, you wantedly throw an error in account, or maybe throw an error in a contact, then automatically a rollback will be run in the catch block. So in that way, neither account nor contact will be inserted into the database. So if you have any such scenario, you can use transactional control statements. Okay. Question number 19, what is a mixed DML operations error? Okay, sometimes we get mixed DML operations error. So what exactly is that? Okay, when we perform DML operations of setup object and non-setup object, very, very important. I'm telling you, I can't stress anymore, but this is really important. Many people have asked interviews, they don't know, what is setup object and what is non-setup objects, because you don't find this very commonly, right? So if you want to check, if an interviewer wants to check you have really worked in a really good environment or with enterprise level project, right? He'll try to ask such questions like, what is setup object and what is non-setup object, right? So when we perform DML operations of setup object and non-setup objects in a transaction, then we get mixed DML operation error, right? So example, inserting an account object. Account is a setup object, okay, and users with a role record in the same transaction, okay. So I'm entering account and user record at the same time. Then we get mixed DML error, mixed DML operations error, okay. So what are the setup and non-setup objects? So setup objects are users, user roles. Non-setup objects are accounts, leads, opportunities, invoice underscore C, so on, right? So you can go ahead and see what are the objects, setup objects and non-setup objects in the Salesforce documentation as well, okay? Question number 21, can you tell me about a few objects which do not support DML operations? Apart from this setup objects and non-setup objects, we have few objects, which are kind of doesn't support DML operations. So what are those? Okay. There are few standard objects which are also known as system objects, right? Which does not support DML operations, like business hours. You cannot do a DML operation on it, right? And you cannot do business process. Okay. You cannot do insert or DML operations on category nodes, currency type, right? Date, conversion rate, process instance, right? There are so many, like profile object also you cannot do, record type, self-serve service user, static resources, territory to, all these are the objects, where you cannot do the DML operations, okay? Question number 22, what is record locking or locking statement in Salesforce? In Apex, we can use for update to lock as objects records while they are being updated in order to prevent race conditions and other thread safety problems, right? So we can lock the records when we want to do an update, right? So we can do so by using the for update statement. Where we can use this for update, let's see. So when an S object record is locked, no other client or users is allowed to make updates either through a code or Salesforce user interface, okay? So we can do like this one, account ACCTS is equals to select ID from account limit to for update, right? At the end of the statement in the select query, you can write, by the way, you can write for update only in, you're writing the select SOQL query in the Apex, right? If you're writing this directly on the SOQL window, then you cannot write, if you're just writing this SOQL query in a SOQL window where you want to select the records, return the records, then you cannot use this for update, okay? So we can use for update to lock the records and do the operations on those records. 23, what is the benefit of locking a statement? So when we use a locking statement, then we can perform logic on the records and make updates, which guarantees that the lock records won't be changed by another client during the lock period, right? So what is the benefit of locking? So we can make sure that no one updates our records while we were working on it, okay? So the lock get released when the transaction completes. As soon as the transaction completes, the record lock gets released, okay? Next question number 24, what are deadlocks? So Apex has possibility of deadlocks and any other procedural programming language involving updates to multiple database tables or rows, okay? So these questions basically, for you to help in answering the scenario based questions, right? So interviewer might ask you some questions, right, where you might have to think of, what will be your approach if something is X or something is Y, right? If this is the scenario, how do you deal with it? If this is the scenario, how do you deal with it, right? For example, they might ask, right, you are doing something and some other statement, you have written a statement, one statement which is doing something, and in turn some other statement is doing waiting for that statement to complete, right? So what does that mean, right? It is nothing but a deadlock, right? So Apex has the possibility of deadlock, as any other procedural programming language involving updates to multiple database tables or rows. Okay. A deadlock is a situation in which two or more transactions are waiting for one another to give up locks, right? So, like maybe Apex class is trying to waiting for something which is done by maybe a flow or a process builder, and a process builder is trying to wait for something which needs to the Apex class. So in turn, both of them are waiting, right? And that is nothing but deadlock, right? So how to next question is question number 25, how to avoid the deadlocks. Okay, so to avoid deadlocks, the Apex runtime engine first lock S object parent records, then children's. Okay, what it does is first it will lock the parent records and then it locks the children's. Okay, so lock S object records in order of ID when multiple records of the same type are being edited, right? So it orders by Salesforce ID and try to lock in that order, okay, instead of locking random records, okay? So as a developer, we should make sure that we are not introducing deadlocks. We should verify using standard deadlock avoidance techniques by accessing tables and rows in the same order from all locations in an application. Maybe try to use order by and then try to do the transactions or manipulations on that, so that you can avoid the deadlocks. Okay. Next question is what is dynamic Apex? Okay. Dynamic Apex enables us to create more flexible applications using describe information. Okay. So the very important thing over here is describe. Okay. I'm sure you have already gone through what is dynamic Apex. So this is also one of the very important question. So by using dynamic Apex, we can write generic code, right? That can be used repeatedly with multiple S objects. Let's say I am writing a code, right? But I don't want to write that code for a specific object, right? If I want to write a code for that specific object, then I will try to use exactly what features or the attributes of that object, right? But I want to write a code which is very generic, right? If, for example, if I want to write a logic, if some users call leads, right? I want to write some logic when the user call accounts, right? So, but I don't want to mention the exact same, names of the objects and so on and so forth, right? So that time we use dynamic Apex. Okay, let me read one more time. So dynamic Apex enables us to create more flexible applications using describe information. So by using dynamic Apex, we can write generic code that can be reused repeatedly with multiple S objects. Okay. So example, with dynamic objects, we don't have to explicitly declare the name of the object like account, lead, or opportunity, right? Based on the condition, we can dynamically use any of the objects and its fields. Okay, we can get the fields and all those things, using the describe method in the dynamic Apex. So you don't have to explicitly have to know all the fields. Okay, the other part of this one is, right, if we create few more fields in the future, right, you don't have to change the code, right? You can dynamically get the fields with the dynamic Apex. So example, we can also retrieve list of all the objects and its fields using the dynamic Apex. So for example, if I want to get if I have a scenario wherein I have to get all the name of the objects in an org, right, that time I can use the dynamic Apex. Okay. Next question is what is dynamic SOQL? It's same like how dynamic SQL, dynamic Apex is, we will have dynamic SOQL as well, right? So dynamic SOQL refers to the creation of SOQL strings at runtime with the Apex code. Okay. So dynamic SOQL enables us to create more flexible applications. It's also same thing, right? But here we are more focused on the queries, how we write the queries. Okay. So example, we can dynamically create a query based on multiple if and else conditions. Okay. So let's say, for example, I have started creating the query like select ID comma name from let's say account. Okay. Then in my if condition, I'm checking that, if type is equals to bank, right? So I might have some queries which is very specific to a bank. Okay, so I can add those queries in my SOQL queries. So else condition I can give if it is you know uh, credit card, right? Type is equals to credit card. Then I can add all the fields which is very specific to credit card into that SOQL query, right? So first time what will happen when the type is bank, then or bank account, then my first query, SOQL query with bank fields will be executed, right? In my else condition, if it is a credit card, then my query with extra fields with for credit card will be executed, right? So in those complex type of scenarios, you can use dynamic SOQL as well. Okay, so use database query method to create the dynamic SOQL. So how do we create the dynamic SOQL? So we have something called as database.query. Okay, so earlier, if you might have seen in my previous slides, I have used like account A is equals to, right, in the bracket I have written select ID comma name comma something else, right, and then bracket close. But here it's different. We should write a database.query. Okay, so I was giving you an example, right? In my first statement, I'll write s object s is equals to database.query. I'll write select ID comma name, right, from let's suppose account, right? In the next query, what I can do is I can append not from account. I'll write from account at the bottom. So first I'll write if condition, and if condition, if it is a bank, then I will continue my query. I'll append my query, right? Uh, Query is equals to another query string. I will add that query where I will write, if it type is equals to bank account, then I'll write few more columns, right? And so on and so forth, as I've given you example for bank account and the credit card, right? And yeah, here my test string is equals to test name, and list of a subject database dot query select ID from my customer where name is equals to like this one. So this is the typical database dot query is the method we use for dynamic SOQL. Okay, so what is dynamic SOQL? Okay, the earlier was SOQL, this one is SOQL, exactly same, but this is for SOQL. So dynamic SOQL refers to the creation of SOQL string at runtime with Apex code, right? So here also we are creating that query dynamically. We are not giving upfront based on multiple if and else conditions. We will be creating the query dynamically. Okay. So this is also example, right? From search, find, edge in all fields, returning account, so on and so forth, right? Then we can write the search dot query. What is with sharing and without sharing in Apex? Okay. With sharing and without sharing keywords are used to enforce or not enforce user permission and field level security. Okay. So basically we are telling that to enforce or not to enforce users permissions and field level security for the Apex classes. Okay, generally Apex runs in a system administrator context. That means the current user's permission and field level security is not enforced. Okay, to enforce current user permission we use with sharing keyword. Okay, next question is what if we do not use with sharing and without sharing? So what will happen if I don't use any of these keywords, right? So by default, Apex class runs without sharing. Okay, that is in system admin context. So if you don't use any of these keywords, then automatically by default, Salesforce runs without sharing, which means in a system admin context. Okay. So the next question is, if Apex runs without sharing, then why do we need to have the keyword without sharing? Okay. So this is mostly used for inner classes. So it's saying that, okay, I'm saying in one side, I'm saying that, okay, if you don't mention anything, automatically it will run without sharing. Then why do we have this without sharing keyword, right? So this is mostly used for the inner classes or in a situation where we are calling methods for multiple different classes. Okay. So example one, I have a class A which is with sharing. I have a class B which is no sharing keyword used. I have not used either with sharing or without sharing. It's just simple class. So what happens is class A calls method in the class B. So A is being triggered maybe from a save method or whatever, and A is running few methods, and it is also calling one method in the class B. So what will happen is both class A and class B runs with sharing, okay, with sharing context, because parent class or the calling class is with sharing. Because the first class which is calling is with sharing, automatically the called class, okay, will also become with sharing. If you have not given any keyword, automatically it becomes with sharing, okay. Let's see the second example. So in example 2, if I have class A with sharing and I have class B without sharing. So here I'm mentioning without sharing. So again, the same example, class A calls method in class B. So class A runs with sharing while class B runs without sharing context, because we have explicitly mentioned the without sharing keyword. Okay. If I mention explicitly without sharing keyword, then class B will not be enforced with sharing as what is there in the calling class. Okay. So this is the difference between what will happen if we write the without sharing and what will happen if we don't write anything. Okay. What is the impact of enforcing sharing rule that is using with sharing keyword on Apex? Okay. What will happen? Okay. So SOQL and social queries will have some impact. So what is the impact? A query may return fewer rows than it would return in a system context. Let's say, for example, as a system administrator, I will get 100 records if I run some query, right? But if I run that same query in an Apex class with sharing, then that person, that sales user maybe, is having access to only 10 records. Okay. So by default, so what will happen is as soon as that class run, it will return only 10 records because we were running with sharing. Okay. So that is the impact. So DML operations will also have some impact. So an operation may fail because the current user doesn't have the correct permissions. Okay. For example, I am running a with sharing, but I have not given access to some field and I'm utilizing that field in the logic, right? So that operation might fail. So you should be very, very careful whenever you are using this with sharing and without sharing, especially with sharing keyword. Okay. What is Apex sharing? Okay. So this is another very, very important question. Okay. So normally we share records using the following configurations, right? So we use record ownership, right? Owner of the record will automatically get access to the record, right? This is a config. Role hierarchy, right? So the person who owns the record and everyone above his role hierarchy, like everyone, all the managers above him will automatically get the ownership of the record, right? And we can also use sharing rules, right? So I can create sharing rule. I can share the records based on my requirements, right? So I have also manual sharing. So in one of cases where I'm not able to reach out to some sharing rule, I can also share manually, right? So these are all we can do by config, right? But Apex sharing is nothing but sharing the records programmatically, right? If none of these are working and you want to share the records programmatically, then we use Apex sharing, right? So when all of the above config options to share the records does not work for our scenario, then we use Apex sharing. Very, very important interview question. Okay. Next question is, can you elaborate how we can share records using Apex sharing or programmatically? So Salesforce has provided a share object. Okay, every object is associated with a share object. If you don't know, just go ahead and see the objects in Salesforce. Okay, not from the setup, but you have to go either from maybe write a SOQL query, or maybe go from Workbench, or maybe use a data loader to see, right? So Salesforce have provided a share object for every object. Okay, all the sharing details of that object records can be stored in that share object. Very important interview question. Very, very important interview question. Okay, so account object have account share object, right? Lead object have lead share object. Opportunity object have opportunity share object, right? And invoice, this is a custom object, right? Will have invoice underscore share object. Okay, so we can store the sharing details into this share objects. Okay, for example, programmatically I have to just give access to particular person only on some conditions, not every time, right? And only on some conditions, and that condition will change based on how he store the record, right? So that cannot be achieved with with config. Okay, then what I can do is programmatically I can share the records, okay, using this share objects. Okay, so that's all for today. We still have a lot of apex question. We will continue. As always, I have referred all this material from help.salesforce.com as well as Trailhead sometimes. So go ahead and refer those documents. This will have all the latest information, not the outdated one. Okay, thank you.